Hello everyone. In this video, we will be evaluating trigonometric functions, and this is the second part. I will put the link of the first part in the description box below. Before we take into some of the examples that we're gonna have, let's have some review on some important information about evaluating trigonometric functions. First, we remember that reference angles are angles that are located in the first quadrant. So I actually cut this piece right here from the unit circle, and this is actually located in the first quadrant. As you can see here, there are coordinates for each of the angles here. So these coordinates are giving us very important information about this angle. We remember that the x represents the cosine of the angle and the y represents the sine of the given angle. So I'm just going to write that down here. Okay, so again, the x represents the cosine of the angle, and then the y represents the sine of the angle. So pretty much in this picture right here, we can go ahead and say that cosine 30 is square root of 3 over 2. Sine 30 is 1/2. Cosine 45 is square root of 2 over 2. Sine 45 is square root of 2 over 2. Cosine 60 is 1/2. And sine 60 is square root of 3 over 2. Now, please remember that these reference angles are very important because once we know the values for each of these angles, we will be able to determine the rest of the values around the unit circle. So again, we need to determine what is the reference angle of a given angle. So pretty much these are the formulas to determine the reference angle. So this is the formula that we use when the angle is in the second quadrant. This is the formula that we use when the angle is in the third quadrant. And this is the formula that we use when the angle is in the fourth quadrant. Now let's have an example to better see how this formula works. So let's take this example right here. So we're supposed to evaluate and we're supposed to write our answer in exact value. By the way, in this part right here, we will have those angles that are more than 360 degrees. So we're going to start with sine 510. There are steps that we need to follow in order that we can evaluate this trigonometric function right there. The first step is to label the unit circle and sketch the angle. In this picture right here, we're going to start with 0, and this is 90, and this is 180, this is 270, and this is 360. So that is one turn. Now, remember that this is 510, so that means we go around one more turn again. So from 360, we add another 90, so this would come out 450. And then this would be, we added 450 plus 90 would be 540. And then 540 plus 90 would be 630. So I'm just going to write that down here. So 630. And then two full turn would be 720 because 630 plus 90 would be 720. So we're going to locate 510. So in this picture here, so if we go around the circle one time, that is 360. But it says 510, so we can go ahead and see that this is 450. So if I stop here, that's 450 right there. And if I go all the way to this negative x side, that would be 540. So I should not go closer to this 540 because we have 510. So I can go ahead and stop somewhere around here. So I'll just approximate it. So this is 510. So I'm just going to label that as 510. So the second step is to determine the reference angle. So this is in the second quadrant. We remember that this is the first quadrant, this is the second quadrant, this is the third quadrant, and this is the fourth quadrant. So 510 is located on the second quadrant. To determine the reference angle, we're going to use the formula for the second quadrant. So that is reference angle is equal to the angle corresponding to the negative x-axis minus the angle that is given to us that is located in the second quadrant. So in this problem right here, I can go ahead and solve for the reference angle. I'm going to show that down here. So reference angle would be the angle that is on the negative x-axis. We're not going to use 180 because that's already more than 360, that's 510. So we're going to use 540. So that would be 540 degrees minus 510. So which means that the reference angle for 510 would be 30, because we have 540 minus 510 is 30. So we go ahead and go back to the reference angle. That is, it's actually pretty much the same as this value that we have here. So we go back to this reference angle, which is again located on the first quadrant. So we go ahead and determine the coordinate for 30 degrees. So I'm just gonna write that up here. So 30 would be this one right here. So I will write it up here. So that is a square root of 3 over 2, and then that's 1/2. And so please remember that on the second quadrant, the x is negative and the y is positive. So we can go ahead and put a negative on the x here. And we are now ready to evaluate sine 510. Again, we remember that the x value is the cosine of that given angle, and then the y value is the sine of that given angle. So since we're looking for sine, which means that the value for sine 510 would be a positive 1/2. So this is the value for sine 510. At this time, I would encourage you to pause this video and try this problem out on your own. And when you're done, unpause it and check your answer. Okay, so we go over the problem here. Again, the first step is to label the unit circle and sketch the angle. So I'm just gonna go ahead and label this unit circle right here. Okay, so I've drawn the picture, and 600 is actually located on this spot right here. It should be before 630, but that should be after 540. So then we go ahead and move on to the second step. The second step is to determine the reference angle, and we evaluate. So in this problem right here, since this is on the third quadrant, I'm going to determine the reference angle using the formula we had on the first slide. Okay, so our reference angle is 60. So we go ahead and go back to the unit circle that we have here, which is the reference angle. We're going to look at the reference angle and determine the coordinate for this. Since this is since the reference angle for this one is 60, so we're looking at 60 right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this coordinate that I see there. So 60 would be 1/2, and then that is square root of 3 over 2. Now, since this is on the third quadrant, the x is negative and the y is negative. So I'm going to put a negative here and a negative here. So both x and y are negative. Now we say that this is cosine. We remember that the x represents the cosine of that angle, and then the y represents the sine of that angle. So in this problem that we have here, we can go ahead and say that since we're looking for cosine, so cosine 600 would be equal to the x value, which is negative 1/2. So the value for cosine 600 is negative 1/2. Did you get the same answer as this? Good. Perfect. Now let's move on to the next example right here. So we are going to be looking for, we're supposed to evaluate tangent 480. We still have pretty much the same steps here. The first step is to label the unit circle and sketch the angle. So in this problem right here, I'm just going to go label all of the important details on this unit circle. And so we need to move on to the second step. The second step is to determine the reference angle. So we're going to use the same formula that we had on the first slide to determine the reference angle. So I'm just going to show the work down here. Okay, so our reference angle is 60. So we go ahead and look at the unit circle again. So we're looking at 60, so it's gonna match up to this. So I go ahead and label this part right here. So that would be, I'm just gonna copy everything, 1/2 and square root of 3 over 2. Okay, since this is on the second quadrant, we remember that in the second quadrant, the x is negative and the y is positive. So I can go ahead and put a negative to the 1/2. We remember that the x represents the cosine of this angle right here, and then the y represents the sine of this angle. But we wanted a tangent 480. So we remember that tangent is actually equal to y over x. So I can go ahead and show the work up here. So that is tangent 480 degrees is actually equal to y over x, or pretty much that is equal to the sine of the theta, whatever that angle is, over cosine of the theta. So this is the other equation to find for the tangent. Aside from opposite over adjacent, so we can also use sine theta over cosine theta. So we go ahead and plug values in. So we remember that this is the x and this is the y. So we can go ahead and put the y first. So that is square root of 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2. Now in this case right here, we remember that if we have a fraction over a fraction, what are we going to do is we are going to flip the denominator and multiply across. I can go ahead and write square root of 3 over 2 times negative, flip it, so that would be 2 over 1. So I can go ahead and cross out 2 and 2 right here. So we're left with square root of 3. So pretty much our value for tangent 480 is actually negative, because there's a negative right there, negative square root of 3. So this is the exact value for tangent 480, which is negative square root of 3. At this time, I would encourage you to pause this video and try this problem out on your own. And when you're done, unpause it and check your answer. Okay, so we go over the problem here. Again, the first step is to label the unit circle and sketch the angle. So in this problem right here, I'm just going to label this one. Okay, so I have labeled the angle, so I need to determine what is this coordinate. In order that I can do that, I need to move on to the second step. We determine the reference angle and we evaluate what is this tangent 690. I'm going to show the work here on how to determine the reference angle, and this is on the fourth quadrant. Okay, so our reference angle is 30 degrees. So then we go ahead and go back to the unit circle, and then we go to the reference angle. So then the values for this one would be, that's gonna be square root of 3 over 2, and then that's 1/2. Now, since this is on the fourth quadrant, remember this is the first quadrant, this is the second, this is the third, and this is the fourth quadrant. Since this is on the fourth quadrant, the x is positive and the y is negative. So I can go ahead and put a negative to the 1/2. So I go ahead and determine the tangent. And please remember that this x represents the cosine of this angle and this y represents the sine of the angle. So none of them is a tangent, but we can determine the value of the tangent by using the formula. Okay, so the value is negative 1 over square root of 3. Since we have a square root that's at the denominator, we're going to rationalize this. Rationalizing means we get rid of the square root on the denominator. So I go ahead and multiply this by square root of 3 over square root of 3. So then I go ahead and this would come out to be square root of 3 over square root of 9, because you have 3 times 3 is 9. So then this comes out to be square root of 3 over 3, and this is a negative value. This is the value for tangent 690. So I go ahead and write here that is negative square root of 3 over 3. Did you get the same answer as this? Good. Perfect. Now let's move on to the next example right here. So we have to evaluate tangent 450. So it's pretty much the same thing. So we are going to follow the steps. The first step is to label the unit circle and sketch the angle. So in this unit circle right here, I can go ahead and label this. Since this is 450 degrees, the coordinate is right here. Remember, this is a unit circle. So that means that the coordinate of this point here is actually the x is 0 and the y is 1. Because again, this is a unit circle. A unit circle has a radius of 1. So that is the x is 0 and the y is 1. So we go ahead and determine tangent 450. So we remember that tangent is actually equal to y over x, or that is equal to sine of theta over cosine of theta. So pretty much we remember that this x value represents the cosine, and then this y value represents the sine of this angle. So we go ahead and plug this in. Our y is 1 and then our x is 0. Anything divided by 0 is undefined. So this value right here is undefined. At this time, I would encourage you to pause this video and try this problem out on your own. And when you're done, unpause it and check your answer. Okay, so we go over the problem here. Again, we are going to follow the steps. We label the unit circle and sketch the angle. So in this case right here, I'm just going to label this one out. We go ahead and remember that this is the cosine of this angle and this is the sine of this angle right here. But we wanted a sine 630. So we go ahead and use the y value, which is negative 1. So the value that we're going to write here would be negative 1, because then again, the y value represents the sine of that angle. Did you get the same answer as this? Good. Perfect. If you find this video helpful, hit like and subscribe for more math videos. See ya!